Hi. And they told me to look into the camera occasionally, so I'm not ignoring you. I'm just supposed to look into the camera occasionally. Hi, I'm Mark Toal from Panasonic, but this class is not designed for people. You don't have to have a Panasonic camera to be in this class. So the idea behind this class is Panasonic does specialize in cameras that are really good at video. And as I went around to camera stores, I kept running into a lot of people, and I was one of them, who really don't have any use for video and don't know what to do with video or how to shoot it. And so, did it just get darker in here, Jan? Or it's a bad time to have a stroke. Well, it's on camera. So, but I kept finding people, and again, I was one of them because I've been a still photographer for 50 years. And so when video came along, I was one of those people who sort of said, oh, you know, I don't really have any use for this. And then, you know, YouTube came along. I had to learn it for my job, and I had grandchildren, and all of a sudden I started going to events that struck me as, wow, this would be good for video. So the idea behind this class, just to make sure you're in the right place for the next hour, hour and a half, is it's video for people who haven't done video and need some basic tips on how to get started at it, both technically and practically. Not as much technically as practically, but both, and how to edit it and how to easily edit it and easily put it online on YouTube, because you're going to want to share this as you do it. We're all going to want to become famous on YouTube. So again, I'm Mark Toal. Feel free at any time during the slideshow to ask questions. I'm not one of those people who have to save them for the end. If you have any question, and irregardless of what it is. Oh, welcome. Are you here for the class?
Yeah.
Oh, come on in. Oh no, it's no problem. We just started. Yeah, just on the second slide. So it really helped me to when I first started doing this. So again, we all know, because we all have still cameras. I see several of them out here. You shoot JPEGs, or you shoot RAW files, or you shoot both of them. So it helped me to realize, I always thought of this video file as being something magical, something like these moving pictures. And it's not. A video file is really just taking 30 still images per second. That's all it is. It's like bursting with your camera and taking 30 still images, and then what it does is it wraps them into a file that plays them back as motion. But if you opened up that file in your computer, if you open it up in a program that does video, you can extract any of those JPEGs you want. So for me, and it's maybe I'm simple, but once I realized that, okay, I'm just taking 30 still images, so you know, it just made a lot more sense to me. Now, remember also, how many people shoot RAW files with their camera? Okay, so videos files are not RAW files. So when you unwrap that, when you take those 30 pictures, they're JPEGs. That's because they're compressed. Now, RAW is coming to video, and Panasonic has one camera that shoots RAW. Canon, I think, has one. Nikon has one. But you can imagine, you know, RAW files are uncompressed. You can imagine how big a file it is if it's 30 uncompressed RAW files per second. It's a nightmare. So you're going to be working with JPEGs, which means a couple of things. One is it means good compression, so videos are pretty small. The other thing it means is you don't have as much control over your color and brightness, shadows, things like that, as you do with a RAW file. Okay, so the basic thing about video, and again, when I first started doing this, a video can capture, this is basically my definition of it, a story. It's an emotion in a way that a still photo can't. So a good example of this is my granddaughter from, I think this was her second birthday, and this still picture was nice, you know. And so let me explain too. So most cameras that you have are set up to do still photos, but they'll have a video button or an easy way to shoot video. And so that's what I'm doing in a lot of these videos. I'll talk about getting into the video settings, but the idea of this class is to get you to leave here and try pushing the red button or the video button on your camera. And the reason for that is it just makes life a lot easier, and you can mix things. You can shoot what they call hybrid photography. So hybrid photography is a combination of shooting stills and video. So I'll do this at something like the birthday party. I'm using my camera, I'm shooting stills of her with the shutter button in front here, like this. And then, when her mother starts to bring the cake, let me play this. When this happens, Come on, you can play. Ah. Oh, don't do this to me. Let's try this. It's not as big to see, but maybe it...
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Eliza. Happy birthday to you.
Now blow him out.
I grew up.
Blow hard. She can do it.
Now you can see the still picture captured the situation. It captured the fact that it was a birthday and she was blowing her cake out. But the video really captured her personality. And at the end, her blowing the candles out and then grabbing the candle and licking it off. And again, so what I'm doing when I'm doing this is I go back, and after this I go back to shooting still pictures. And again, if I want to shoot video, I just push the red button. And now I'm shooting a little bit of video. And when I'm done, I push the red button again to stop the video. And on my SD card, so when I put that in my computer, I've got a mixture of JPEGs and video files that can be opened up in any program. So again, the idea is, when do you decide? Oops, just giving me a fit here. Okay, so when do you decide when to shoot a still or a video? So when I first started doing this, I thought, okay, I'm just going to shoot, I'm going to start shooting videos of everything. And I was out in Oregon shooting landscapes, and there was a river running through it and everything, and I shot this video, and I shot like 20 seconds of it, and I brought it home and I showed it to my wife, and she said, gee, that's really neat, but isn't there supposed to be something going on in there? Isn't there supposed to be something happening in that video? And it dawned on me that yes, so when is a situation that you decide to shoot video or not shoot video? So this is a steam train that runs in Portland, Oregon. And I go out every winter and I shoot this train, and I've got all these great stills that make giant prints like this that I've had printed on metal, and they're on my wall. But after a couple of years of it, I thought, boy, this would really look good as a video. And so what I did was, last winter when I went out there, I shot a video of it. Now, I know life is not all about how many views you get on Facebook and Instagram. Well, my life is. but everybody's life is not about how many views you get. But if I put a still picture on Facebook or Instagram or on any other thing online where I'm sharing pictures, I might get 30 or 40 views or likes. I put this video on, and in the first, it's had 21,000. Well, this was after the first week. It had 21,000, 3,100 in the first 2 weeks. It's had 21,000 so far. People just really respond to video. So if you can learn to shoot and post a little bit of video and make it as easy as stills. So let's talk about your video. So again, we talked about how to keep this as simple as possible. The things you want to do in video is you want to keep your scenes very short, like that one I did of the birthday. Now, when you push the video button on your camera, there's going to be a counter somewhere on the camera that's going to tell you how many seconds you're shooting. I try to keep it between 10 and 20 seconds. It has to be something really important for it to go to longer than 20 seconds, because people just won't keep watching it. They won't have the attention span for it. Have you gone on, I'm sure everybody's gone on YouTube, and if you're like me, you go on YouTube and I start to learn something, let's say about my my hedge trimmer or whatever I'm trying to learn to buy, and if I look at the time on that video and it's 12 minutes, I don't watch it. Or I drag that slider along, and if it says it's a minute and a half, I'll sit there and watch it. But if that guy starts to say, well, I was going to Sears to buy it and I didn't like them, and it's like, just get to the point. And that's the idea of video, is get to the point of what you're doing. Okay, so keep your scenes short. When you first start shooting these video clips, keep them between 10 and 20 seconds. I just kept all mine at 10 to begin with. There's a tendency to want to move the camera while you're shooting video, to think that it's going to show motion if I do this. It doesn't. It's not how we view video. If you watch TV or movies, they very seldom ever pan across a scene like this. Okay? So you don't want to do that. And there's also a tendency, again, when you're first doing this, and I know all this from experience, of wanting to zoom in on something. And so you think, God, I got this great zoom lens, so I'm shooting this group. Oh, I'm going to zoom in on that guy. He looks real interesting. But all of this is not pleasing to the viewer. And I've learned this because I brought my videos home, I showed them to my family, and they get this feeling of, wow, that's making me nauseous when you do this. So the way to think about this is, again, keep the scene short. Remember that the action takes place in this frame. You're not the action. So if there's nothing going on out here that has action in it, don't shoot a video. But don't become the action. Don't do this and don't zoom. So a good example is like the train video or the birthday video. The action was taking place in there and I held the camera still. So when you have a camera like this, and Brandon's a good example because I don't know the other cameras like the Canons. What? Well, you'll know. You know, I've only known you for a couple hours, but I can tell you know just about everything. And you know a lot about video. So like Panasonic cameras have a red button. Most cameras have a simple button to push, don't they? To start video, and then a more complicated way to do it, right? So when you push this red button on a Panasonic camera, and I assume it's this way on other cameras, everything is full auto. So even if you have this in aperture or shutter priority, it ignores it. When you push this, it sets everything for you, which I like, because I don't really want to think about it when I'm doing a video if I'm doing one like the birthday video. Yes, sir?
Some cameras allow you to do it totally manually.
Yeah.
I use my Z camera on video. I control the aperture, I control the shutter speed.
Yeah.
I control
Yeah, every camera will let you do it, but some will let you. When you push that button, it's all auto. But then you can go into another setting and you can set your shutter or your aperture or things like that. And you can choose your ISO. You can always choose your ISO. So, because I'm from Panasonic, if you have questions about your Canon, your Nikon, if you have a Sony, whatever, these guys are the experts. Brandon is, like I said, I've known him for a couple hours, and this guy really knows video. He's not real good at audio, but and I hope he has a sense of humor. I hope he has a sense of humor to boot. But your first line of defense here is when you want to learn something is come down and talk to these guys, because they can show you, like if you've got a Z series camera or a Canon camera, they can show you just exactly how to set up video on it. Your second line, if you're, let's say it's 2 in the morning and you don't have Brandon's home number or his cell phone number, YouTube is the place to go. And so you would just go, your camera is a Z6, is it, or Z9? Z7. You would just go to YouTube and you would type in Nikon Z7 video, and you'll find just a ton of videos about. You'll in fact have to break it down a little bit about how to shoot, how to do it technically. You'll find a ton of videos about how to use your camera. So again, if you're trying to do something and you can't get in here to Horn to talk to these guys, just go on YouTube and look it up. So a couple other things that are really important. Yep. Oh, expand it. Like that? Yeah, I don't think that. I'll have to see if the videos play. I might have to go back. For some reason, the videos aren't playing in this mode. So I don't know what it is. So anyways, as you can see, Brandon's got this camera on a tripod. Another thing you want to do in video, besides not zooming, you want to really limit things that cause the camera to be noticed. And one of them is hand holding it. Because even though cameras have great stabilization now, just holding like this is going to make for a somewhat shaky video. So the first accessory I would get would be either a tripod, or I really like monopods like this, and Horn here sells both of them. The reason I like the monopod is I walk around a lot with it, like when I'm shooting the train, and I can just plant it down and shoot with it. It also works great for stills, and obviously a tripod works great in a situation like this. The next thing that's really important about video is audio. As you noticed, and I don't mean this in a bad way, when we were setting up, the audio was really noticeably disturbing. And so you want audio that not only is really clear, but is directional. And that's what something like a directional microphone, like the Rode microphone, will do. So every camera has a microphone that's built in the top. So you don't need anything to get started. And that's the idea behind this class is, I want you to be able to go out and just push the red button, and then hopefully you'll get bit by the video bug and you'll want to come back and buy a tripod and a microphone. But the microphones that are built into the camera are right up here. And they're wonderful because they're small, but their problem is they're not directional. They pick up all around us. So if there's something back here making noise like this, it's going to pick it up. Okay, if there's a bird back there, you're going to hear it just as well as you're going to hear the person speaking in front. So a microphone like the Rode microphone or any of the shotgun microphones directs that audio towards the front. And that's typically where you want it to be from. So if you're interviewing somebody or they're talking, it's going to eliminate all that noise around you. So that would be, these two would be my first accessories, because people are going to notice the shakiness in your video if you're not hand holding, and especially if you're trying to walk with it. And they're going to notice if the audio isn't good. Just again, if you hear a buzzing or you hear just external noise around you. Now, the microphones that are down in the bottom are the same thing that we're using here. I'm using a, he's got the receiver, I've got the transceiver. So when I speak to this is basically a wireless way to do this. Okay, so if you're interviewing somebody, or they use these a lot on TV, you'll see them, like the news people use these, and it's wirelessly transmitting, so I don't have to have a wire. Because if you're using a shotgun microphone like the Rode, they tend to work good within about, let's say, 6 to 10 feet. And so this lets me go as far as the radio frequency will handle it here. Exactly. But the shotguns are a great way to get started. I like, as you'll notice as we go along here, I like to keep everything simple. And the nice thing about the shotgun is it stays on top of the camera. It just goes into the hot shoe on top of the camera. When you start to get into these, then you start to just get into a little more connection and wires and things like this. Okay. Let's talk about interview tips, because this is a great way to get started with people. If you're getting started in video and you're hesitant about talking to people, interviewing them, do you have a grandchild? Do you have a son? Do you have a best friend? Somebody you can ask questions to about something? So what I'm going to do is play this in a second here. But the way to do this is you ask the question. You don't ask the question on the camera. So if I'm interviewing you, I don't say, what part of town do you live in? Okay. So what I tell you is I'm going to ask you that question, and you're going to answer the question by repeating the question in it. Okay. So what I do with this guy here, with John, is I ask him the question and I ask him to repeat it back, and you'll hear him do that. So what you do is pretend this is on a tripod. I have this actually, I'm starting to build the kit here. So I have this camera on a monopod, and I'm in the cab of this train. So the reason I've got it on a monopod is I'm on a platform that's about as wide as this table, so I don't have room up there for a tripod. Okay, I've got a shotgun microphone on it. I don't have he's not wearing a lavalier. This is just a shotgun microphone at him. And I said, with the camera turned off, I said, would you explain to me what you're doing here, what the process is? They're rebuilding this steam engine. And would you explain that by saying what we're, you'll hear it, the project we're doing here. Let's see if this is going to play. That is so weird how it won't play with that. But if I go back here, that's big enough to see, I think. Okay.
So what we're doing here is we're removing gauges and piping and other things that are in the way of the jacketing that's on the back of the boiler, so that we can have access to making measurements of the boiler behind the jacketing.
Okay, let me go back for a second. So what I do is I say, when I start the camera, I want you to explain what you're doing here, but I want you to say the project, what we're doing here. And what I do, so I have the camera on the tripod. It's turned on, but it's not recording. Okay. I start to record, pushing the red button, not the black one. I start to record, and I signal him 1, 2, 3. And that's when I want him to start talking. I want 3 seconds of silence at the beginning. At least 2, but I'd like 3. There's no reason not to have more, because you're going to edit it out later on. And the reason for that is you don't want it to start with him in mid-word. You want there to be a little bit of gap. You'll notice this, like on the morning news, when they switch to the reporter in the field, there's a gap between the time that they switch to them, so they don't automatically start talking. Okay, so then when he gets to the end, what I do is he stops talking, and he just looks at the camera, and I count 1, 2, 3, and I turn the camera off. That way I have a buffer on the end, so at the very end, he isn't just turning away and ending the video. So you've got this buffer that you're going to edit out. Okay? And So, hybrid photography. That was strictly video. I was just videoing these guys. They used that video on YouTube because they needed to raise money to donations to help repair the train. So I wanted him to explain what they were doing. And at the end, we put a thing up there, or he says something about you can go to this website to make donations to help fix the train. But this is hybrid photography, and this is what is, I think, really useful for people who do mostly stills. So this guy, Art, he got my name as a still photographer. I met him because he was the president of a camera club in Hood River, Oregon. And he's got this 1950, 53 MGTD. And he said, would you come over and, yeah. Was it? Oh, really? It's a neat little car. So this was the first time I really did a hybrid project. So Art said, would you shoot just some pictures of me and the MGTD, because he was going to have to sell it. He just couldn't, he felt he was getting too old to drive it. He tried, he's an architect, and he had an office in his house, so he thought he would bring it into his house and put it on display into his office, and you can never get the gas smell out of a car. And he found out quickly that you can't have one in your office. So he was going to sell it. And I said, well, I'll come out and do it if I can shoot some video also. And this is what made me started thinking about this class, because Art's a still photographer. He likes to shoot birds. And he said, knock yourself out. He goes, I don't like video, but if you want to do it and you'll give me some still pictures. So I go out there. And because I was kind of still getting new to this, I brought all my equipment. I brought a tripod, I brought the lavalier microphone, I brought everything, and you've owned an MGTD. You're not going to get any of that in an MGTD. Yeah, exactly. So I broke some of my rules. So I put a shotgun mic on top, and we drove around in the car just with me hand-holding the camera. But what I did here at the beginning, and I'll play this as I explain, it's just a minute and a half or 2 minutes long. But you'll see at the beginning here, so this is where I asked Art. So I told Art, I said, the question I'm asking you is, how did you get this car? But you're not going to hear me say that. I'm going to do the thing, how did you get this car? I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and you're going to say, you're going to hear him, I found this car this way. And so he's going to tell that story in these 2 questions. And then what we did is we took off in the car, and all I could take was the camera and the shotgun microphone. So all of the shots from in the car are actually handheld, which I just told you not to do. But what I did was I steadied it against the frame of the window, or I steadied it against the frame of the car and held it just as tight as I could as Art and I drove around in this car. And
A woman at my son's junior prom party brought some photographs of an MGTD that she had just bought that she was going to fix up with her family. And I was impressed. I'd always wanted one. My older brother's friend had one. So through the following 6 years, I had seen her at Safeway and things like that, and asked her about the car. And pretty soon she came back and said, yes, she'd sell it. So I ended up with an MGTD.
so the rest of it's just music, so I'm going to turn the music down. So here I actually have the camera on a tripod with wheels, and I'm rolling it along the driveway here and just shooting kind of a panoramic view of this car. You can see me walking in it there. And so this, again, just to try to keep it steady. Now, the image is a little jerky just because of the way my computer is talking to this projector. All these are on my website, or on Vimeo. And so then we take off in the car. And again, I'm just holding it on top of the windshield as we go along here. I'm holding it out the door. I'm just moving it around. I'm turning and shooting Art. I've got a wide-angle lens, so I'm just backing up in this car, which isn't easy, as much as I can. And I'm just shooting scene after scene after scene. Now, this isn't what Art is interested in at all. So the reason this is hybrid is in a minute here we're going to stop, and I'm going to take still pictures of the car so that Art can have those, so that he's happy. This one I had him drop me off, and I have the car coming over the hill. Okay, so then we stop at a nice place where the lighting's real nice, and I shoot all these still pictures because this is what Art wants. He wants to make these prints to put on his wall, and I'm just recording this car. So hybrid is a combination of stills and video together, and when you're in an editing program, you can drop these in. You can drop a still between a video sequence. This was at the time a special program I used. called ProShow Gold, which actually, it was kind of neat. I don't know if it's still out there, but what you would do is you would just put all of the stills and all of the video files in a folder and tell the program to make your video, and it would do all these fancy transitions. It's really a neat program. We've got Art driving the car. Let me go a little further. And then we have close-ups. These are all stills. Close-ups of the engine, the hood ornaments, just to record the whole scene. Now, obviously, so Art didn't know what he was going to get, even though I tried to explain to him. This was when hybrid was still fairly new. But when he saw this, he was just beside himself. He was just like, I just sent this to my son. I sent it to all my friends. This is the coolest thing in the world. You know? And then we do the final shot of him driving off into the distance with the car, which we had to do 5 times because every time I did it, another car would come across the hill the other way. So we just kept doing this over and over again. So anyways, that's what hybrid photography is. It's the combination of doing stills and video together, again, like I did at the birthday party, like I'll do at, I recently went to a steam tractor festival, and I did a combination of stills and video together. Okay, let me go back to the full screen view here. Okay, so stabilization. So another way to stabilize your camera is to use a gimbal, and so this is a handheld way to do it. Do you sell gimbals? Yep, Horn has everything. Yeah. So a gimbal is a nice way to walk around with a camera. So if I wanted to film the class here and I wanted to move around while I did it, let's say move in like this, if I was holding the camera, it would jump every time I moved. But the gimbal holds it perfectly still. Once you balance it, it just holds that camera, and that camera just floats on it. So the gimbal is a little more advanced, but it's really useful. Lighting. So the next thing that's important is lighting. So again, outside, no problem, but inside you're going to need constant lighting. So if you're in a still photographer and you've ever used a flash, you know the flash bursts. And so you're going to use LED lighting, or sometimes it's compact fluorescent. I think. Do you guys sell both, or just LED? Oh, where?
I think it's primarily LED.
I think it is.
Incandescent anymore, but
Yeah.
yeah, we got different variations of LEDs too. So you have different controls over what color temperature the LED is, and all that stuff.
Exactly.
A lot of different options.
Yeah, you can control if it's yellow or if it's whatever the temperature is to match whatever lighting you've got. But you can have these little lights that'll fit on top of your camera that'll light just somebody if you're interviewing them. Or you can use the studio type lights if you've got a situation, let's say I was interviewing you and I wanted real even lighting. I do some, and it's funny, I'm getting more call for this. I do some business photography where I'll come into a business like Horn and I'll shoot stills of the business for their website, and now they're frequently asking for videos. And so now I'll come in with the video lights and I'll set the video lights up and interview an employee or interview the owner and things like that. So, and the nice thing is these things are so much more easy to use because you see exactly what you're going to get. When you're dialing the color in on it, you see exactly what it's going to look like. Okay, so let's talk about lenses. And again, the idea is keeping this simple. So I try to avoid really wide angle lenses when I'm shooting video. The reason is if you're shooting a lens that's, let's say, the equivalent of a 14 millimeter or a 16 millimeter, if you do move that lens, the edges get real weird because there's some distortion to it. And so as you move, if you're taking stills, you don't notice it because each picture is individual. But if not, you see like a waviness on the side. So the two most popular lenses are the 12 to 35, which this is a 4/3 lens, which fits the Panasonic crop sensor cameras. It's the equivalent of a 24 to 70. I recommend people start out with the 24 to 70 because that covers interviews, if they want to do interiors. Real estate is really popular now. Which one do you have? That's fine. Yeah, that's a really close range to it. And a lot of people use wide angle, like this starts at 20 millimeters. Yeah, 50 would be for, so a good example. So she's got this lens, which is kind of the equivalent to a 24 to 70. So this is perfect if I want to shoot a wide picture of the group or I want to zoom in a little bit and shoot one person. Whereas the 50 equivalent would be just for a single person. And this would let you throw that background a little bit out of focus. Same thing as with still pictures. Yeah. But just mainly don't go too wide. You wouldn't want to go any wider than 20 millimeters, again, because of the distortion that you get. So the two lenses that I think videographers use the most are the 24-70 and the 70-200. Kind of the bread and butter of sports photography and a million other things, wedding photographers. So you don't need a lot of choices. Okay, let's talk a few technical tips. Okay, so there is 1080p. Does everybody know what 4K is? I think by now they do 4K TVs. So, you know, like when you go in Costco or Best Buy, a 4K TV. So 1080p is high definition, and that's what a lot of TVs still are. A lot of streaming stuff like Netflix is mostly HD. And 4K means it's 4 times that resolution. Now, the funny thing is so when people are shooting video, I'll have people come up to me and go, oh, my video is going to be great because I have, and I don't mean to pick on you, it's like I have a Canon camera with 48 megapixels or whatever it is, 35 or 48. Well, video, HD video is 2 megapixels. Every one of those JPEG frames is 2 megapixels. And 4K video is 8 megapixels. So the most you're shooting, when I push that red button and it starts to shoot that video, every frame of that video, if I'm shooting 4K, is only 8 megapixels. And the reason it has to be is if you can imagine if you were taking 30 megapixel files or even 24s, your file would be huge. And you also couldn't shoot 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second or 120 in slow motion. So if you can shoot 4K with your camera, I would shoot 4K. Most new cameras, like I know the Canons, the Nikons, your camera, they all have, yours has 5.7K. Yeah, a lot of them will go up to, and some of them are now going up to 8K. So, but shoot at least 4K if you can. The only reason you wouldn't want to is if you have an older computer. And so try it first. Before you go out and shoot something important, put your camera in 4K mode, and these guys can show you how to do it, and shoot a little clip of 4K and bring it into your computer and see if it'll open. Because if you have an older laptop or an older desktop computer, it'll run too slowly and it'll drive you crazy. And if so, just back up to 1080p to high definition. Okay? So you're going to have formats. So when you're shooting stills, you have JPEGs and you have RAWs. Okay? In video, you have MPEGs or MOVs. And what that means is motion JPEG is what MPEG is. That is just those 30 JPEG frames wrapped together in a file that is called an MPEG or a MOV. I don't see any difference. I think you just choose whichever one you want. They were known for years as one being invented by Apple and one being invented by the PC people, but it's all blended together now. If you are not sure and you're just starting out, choose the MPEG. The reason is YouTube and everybody online supports it. And they'll support MOV too, but everybody supports MPEG, just like they do JPEGs. Okay, the other thing that's important too is if you're photographing, you're videoing people, is set your focus in your camera to face eye detection and set it to continuous autofocus. So when you're shooting stills, you're probably shooting in the S mode for single autofocus. So it just focuses on that person and sort of locks on there. But in continuous autofocus, when that person moves, or if I move, so let's say you're walking towards me, it'll continuously change the focus as you walk towards me. Where if you're in the single focus mode, it won't. Okay? So video needs to be shot in the continuous autofocus mode. The nice thing about cameras having face eye detection now is like in the Panasonic cameras, and I think most of them do this, is it'll find the eye that's closest to you, it'll find the face and put a box around it, and it'll find the eye that's closest to you and put a cross over it so it stays locked on that. Okay, let's talk about white balance. Most of the time nowadays you don't have to think about white balance. You just leave your camera in automatic white balance, or you shoot raw and you can adjust the white balance afterwards in post-processing. But in video you can't. So in video, if you think about it, they're all JPEG files. So you know how occasionally you'll be shooting like, probably if I shot indoors here with those lights they have back there, my picture would come out with a yellowish cast to it. You can't, it's very hard to get that out of a video because it's like a JPEG file. So if you can white balance, if you can learn to white balance your camera, and all you have to do is go online and like go to the Image Maven. She's got some great videos, but there are a lot of great videos about white balancing. You can buy a white balance card, I'm sure, for here at Horn Photo, can't you? Yeah, they have white balance cards, and it's just as simple as holding it in front of your camera and pushing the manual white balance button, and it'll adjust to that light. But you have to kind of get, one thing about videos, you kind of have to get things right in the camera more than you do with stills if you're shooting raw photos, because you just don't have as much adjustment in these files. Okay, so let's talk about different autofocus modes, because focus is extremely important in video, again, because things are moving. And if when you're shooting a video, if something is going in and out of focus because it can't find it, it's really distracting. It's just like moving the camera or zooming while you're shooting. So again, you want to use the autofocus continuous, which a good example is here that it's like, think of something like a truck coming towards you. And it's just better, even if the person isn't going to move, even if I'm shooting, like when I was shooting an interview with the guy with the train, I still want to do it just in case he moves forward for some reason. You know, just in case something happens where he changes. I don't want that locked on him, and the continuous will change that. So again, it's for predictable movements. Okay, face eye detection. And again, these are modes that are in the Panasonic camera, but I guarantee they're in all cameras. They might be called something slightly different. And again, if you wonder about this for your Canon, Nikon, or Sony, just come on in and ask these guys, and they can answer the question for you. Okay. So again, this is really important. As we talked about 4K or 1080p. So again, 4K is 4 times the resolution. But besides the fact that it means a faster computer, it also means faster memory cards. So really try this out. If you don't have a fast enough memory card, if you're using a memory card from an older camera and you start to shoot 4K video, it'll just stop because it can't write the data to the card fast enough. So again, these guys can answer questions, and the card says on it how fast it is. These guys can look at the card and tell you if it's fast enough for 4K. So basically what I'm saying about 4K is don't go out and shoot it without trying it. 8K, 8 megapixels, 8K is a whole nother ball game. But the thing about 4K is it's noticeably sharper when you bring it onto a 4K TV because it's 4 times the resolution. If you think back, if you're a photographer from years ago like I am, and you think of the jump that cameras made when they went from 2 to 8 megapixels, it was huge. So there's a good chance nowadays, if you've bought a TV within the last 5 years, that it's a 4K TV. So shoot 4K if you can. And what we call future-proofing your videos, this means that if you're shooting things like kids, or you're shooting things that you want to save for the future, and it's in 4K, everybody's going to be watching an 8K TV in the future. So you know how when they show a TV show or something from the 1980s or 90s, it looks sort of soft and out of focus? Yours would look the same way. So the important thing about shooting 4K is that in the future, when your kids play these videos, they're going to look great. They're not going to look like they're old, like the videos that we shot. Okay, so shoot your first video. So let's just go. This just basically builds on all the things that I talked about so far. So your camera's on a tripod. So I'm at this Steam festival that I go to that was just a couple of weeks ago. So I've got my camera on not a tripod but a monopod, because I'm walking all over this like 4-acre area shooting these tractors and just shooting all these engines. And the reason, here's a good example. So the first time I went to this Steam festival, I shot all still pictures. And I got home and I was telling my wife about the great sound and all these engines running, these steam engines, and the wheels going around, and they were splitting wood, and they were making ice cream out of steam engines. And I showed her all the still pictures, and she was kind of like, I don't get it. You know, what was thrilling about that? And so the next year I went back and I strictly shot video so that you can hear things like this. Let's see, I think I have to go back to the small size there. So a good example of why people prefer video is the Steam. This Steam festival was a couple weeks ago, and I went there, and I like to shoot pictures and then transfer them to my phone from my camera and post them on Instagram and social media immediately. I just love doing it, and so I shot a couple of still pictures and I posted them on Instagram and Facebook. And a little while later, I sat down to get out of the heat and I checked, and there was like 12 views. Right. Then I took a video of one of these engines going by like this, and I posted it on. Jan and I were talking about this today. I posted it on an Instagram reel, okay, which is a way that they show videos. And by the time I got home, it had 10,000 views. And so the impact of video. So again, it's that situation where this situation just begged for video because of the sound and watching these giant engines go by that you just didn't capture in a still. So again, I'm still probably 75% a still photographer, but when a situation like this begs for it, and with Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, that's where everybody looks for pictures nowadays. You know, they're not, you don't show your still pictures to somebody very often. So again, autofocus continuous. This is an important slide. It's got everything in it. Video light is an option. I didn't need one here. And all I'm doing here is pressing the red button to start and stop. I'm not getting into the menu to set up all the complicated settings. I'm not in aperture, shutter priority. This is full auto, and the camera is doing everything. It's setting the ISO, it's adjusting the light, it's doing everything for me. Okay, so YouTube is obviously huge, and so if you want to get into teaching or doing product reviews, if you look at I'll put my sites up at the end. If you look at my videos on Vimeo and on Facebook, I do a lot of them. I've done a lot of training videos for Panasonic where we literally set the camera up like this one here, and somebody operates it, and I hold the camera and say, and you've seen these, on every subject. You go into there, you can watch them on, I just recently got into electric bikes. And so I started watching videos on electric bikes, and they set up a camera. The guy does something on the bike. He shows you how he likes it. It's very easy to do now. And you'll notice that one has a swivel monitor like this. So if your camera has one of those, that's just really important to be able to do this, put it on a tripod, walk along with it. There's a lot of people who walk along with it, but I don't like that. But you want this so it faces you, and you can just see that you're in focus and you're in frame there. Okay, so let's talk about advanced video settings. So up until now, we've been talking about just pushing this red button to start. Now, everybody's familiar with the mode dial on your camera up there. Let me make this a little bit larger again. So everybody's familiar with the program, aperture, shutter, manual, which are all still settings. So the Panasonic cameras, and I assume Canon and Nikon and Sony have something like this, there's a setting on the dial that gives you access to the manual video settings so that you can go in and really customize your video. When you go there, so when you go to the M video and you push the menu button, you get a whole different set of menus that have to do with video. If you're in the other four modes, you get still modes. And there's an example of it over here on the side. So there's things like variable frame rate. Variable frame rate means slow motion. So 30 frames a second is normal motion. It's like you've seen in all these videos. When you go to a higher frame rate like 60 or 120, that's slow motion. So 60 is half speed, 120 is quarter speed if your basis is 30. But you can do things like what are called synchro scan. You get into a lot of things. SS gain operation. When you start to get into video and you run into video people, they don't talk in shutter speed. They talk in shutter angle. And so one thing that's important is if you make that step up to doing manual video, the first thing you're going to want to do is your shutter speed should always be twice your frame rate to get a smooth video. So if you're shooting your video, like most cameras, when you first turn them on, they default to 30 frames a second. Some of them 60. You want if it's 30 frames a second, you want your shutter speed to be a 60th of a second. And you want if it's a 60th of a second, you want your shutter speed to be 125. If your shutter speed is twice your frame rate, your motion will look not like it does here because of the projector, but it'll look natural. It'll look smooth. Okay, if your shutter speed is too high, it'll look jerky. It'll look like it's stilted, like old movies. Okay, and if it's too low, it'll look blurry because you'll get this drag to it. So when you move your hand, you'll see that all the fingers will like blur into one. And again, if it's too high, it'll look like that. So all you got to do is double it. But and I don't want to get too much into these settings, but what shutter speed gain does, so when you use shutter angle, if you set your shutter angle to 180 degrees, it always sets your shutter speed to twice your frame rate. But that's about as far as I want to get into the complicated part of it. But that's probably the first thing to learn as you get into more advanced in manual video settings. But what you'll find is just a huge, there's probably 10 pages of menus here of things that you can set to do custom video. But again, you can do it just simply. I don't go into this very much in this talk because it scares people away. It scared me away when I first started doing it. You know, I would go to these seminars and classes where they would start to talk about anamorphic and synchro scan, which means that you can change that shutter angle slightly to avoid blinking lights and things like this. And it just turned me off to it. So start out by pushing the red button, and then there's a lot of videos online. And again, you know, Brandon is, I don't know if you're the main video guy here, but yeah, but Brandon's the guy to ask about all this stuff. When you start to get into it, you want to make that step up. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about exposure because it's similar, but it's different than it is for stills. So in stills, you have shutter aperture, what they call the exposure triangle, aperture, shutter speed, ISO, and you can kind of change any of them any way you want. So if your light's too low, you can raise your ISO. If you're in a situation where you want to shoot, like I was at the rodeo, where you want to stop action, you can raise your shutter speed. You can change your aperture for lighting or for depth of field. You can't do all this in video, and you'll hurt your video. So again, the shutter speed should be twice the frame rate, and it should be stuck there. So it's kind of fixed, but don't. Now, you'll run into video people who will say your shutter speed has to be twice your frame rate or you just shouldn't shoot video. Stay away from those people because you can vary it. I've shot with my shutter speed 4 times my frame rate, and the normal person can't tell the difference. Okay? But technically you should set your shutter speed at, let's say, a 60th of a second, and then you use your aperture to control the light. So your exposure is then only controlled by 2 things, not 3 in video. So your shutter speed is locked, so your aperture and your ISO are what control your exposure. Okay. And again, don't get you know, these aren't hard and fast rules, but if you want your videos to look the best, you should keep your shutter speed at that setting. And then what I do is I use auto ISO a lot, and I let it adjust itself when I'm doing these videos. So I'll set my shutter speed to a 60th. I'll set my aperture to something like, let's say 5/6, depending on how much depth of field I want and where the room is. And I'll let the ISO determine my exposure. Because, you know, the thing about ISO is the higher the ISO, the noisier the image. So there's always this thing in our brain about you want to stay away from these really high ISOs, but you don't notice noise as much in video. Because again, you've got these 30 frames running by really quickly, and their noise is in a different place in every frame. So when they run continuously together, it doesn't look as noisy as a still picture does. So don't be as afraid of letting your ISO go to a higher setting. So some advanced tips. Okay, you're going to run into things too. So I'm hoping all of you go try video, and a few of you get kind of bit by the bug and want to add it to your repertoire of stuff. And you're going to run into these things as you start watching videos online. You're going to start running into things like, and we're not going to go into these at depth, and you actually don't need to know these things. 8 or 10 bit, 420, 422. So 8 or 10 bit refers to how much color it has in it. Okay, so how much gradation it is picking up in the picture. So in let's say 8-bit, you might have 256 gradations. So picture a sunset. A sunset has more than 256 gradations of color in it. Okay, so 10-bit has, let's say, thousands of gradations, so it's a lot smoother. But do you notice this? Unless you're really a purist about it, or unless you do a lot to your videos in post-processing, I don't worry about it. I always shoot 8-bit. I leave the camera in 8-bit. Because again, every time you go to one of these higher settings, you get bigger files. Videos can get really huge, and they can also tax your computer. So like in a still camera, even though it might shoot 50 frames a second, your computer can handle each one of those frames because they're the same size. But if you go to a video that's, let's say, 10-bit that's recording more color, it becomes a bigger file. You might bring it into your computer and click on it, and it'll play very slow or not at all. 420, 422 refers to the sort of the depth of color, and a good example of this is in the fall when all the leaves on a tree are red. You probably all have this happen where you shoot a picture of it with your camera and it looks beautiful, but then when you look at the picture, it looks like one solid sheet of red. You don't get all the fine gradations of red in there. And that's because it's something like 420, which is referring to the 3 colors. 422 just gives you more depth of colors. And I'm just bringing this up more because you'll run into this as you start watching things, and it's easy to find more out about this or come on in and talk to Brandon. And you might want to get into them, but they can really mess up your post-processing. Color modes. So just like in stills, you have color modes like standard, natural. Video ones, though, are a little bit flatter. You don't want to use, let's say, vivid for video. You want to shoot them a little bit flatter. It makes it look a little more natural, is very popular. But again, you can just stay with standard. Vlog, you're going to run into a lot of things talking about Vlog. Vlog requires special software to process it. So if you want to get involved in Vlog, come on and talk to these guys or watch the videos on YouTube. What Vlog does is when you shoot a video in Vlog, and this refers to the way it looks, the color on the back of the camera, it looks like it has no color and it looks like it has no contrast. And so what the idea is, you add that back when you get into the computer. So unless you know how to do that, don't go down that road. These are mostly things it sounds like I'm telling you to watch out for, and I am, because they can make your life a lot more complicated, but they can, as you get into more advanced videos, they can make them look a lot better. So frame rates. So you're going to run into 24 and 30, which tend to be the normal frame rates of just normal motion when you're shooting anything, like the tractor when I was shooting the guy I was interviewing. 60 and above is full frame. So again, 60, if 30 is normal, 60 is half speed. So that's when you start to get, those nice slow motion. They use them a lot in weddings and things like that, where the bride's walking down the aisle and they're just walking at half speed. Yeah. You can get up to 300 frames per second, which is a tenth of normal speed, which is way too slow. But again, most cameras now offer at least 60 frames per second, and a lot of them offer 120 or 180 frames per second. So just anything higher than 30 means slow motion. Stills from 4K video. So this is kind of cool because 4K video, every frame is 8 megapixels. You can actually pull a frame out of it. So I shot this down in Venice Beach. So not there, but watch, this kid goes around again. Watch when he comes back here. Right there, okay? Just for a split second. So this was a situation, and this is one I also use at rodeos, because if any of you have tried to shoot a rodeo, when they open that gate, till the time that guy falls off of that horse or that cow or he's in the dirt is 3 or 4 seconds. And there's no way that you can get that shot of him, those shots you see where the guy is just like flying up on the thing and he's holding the rope. The only way to do that is to either shoot in a burst mode if you're shooting stills, but you can shoot 4K video. You're shooting 30 frames per second, okay? And then I'm going to show you when you're playing it back. Do people use Lightroom? Does everybody use like a Lightroom or a program like that? I'm going to show you in Lightroom how to pull a single frame out of it. And it all of a sudden makes you this like expert photographer. I've used it at rodeos, I've used it at drag races, and if you shoot it, because you're getting 30 frames a second, you're getting every bit of motion. And so you get that cowboy, and he comes out of there, and so as soon as they pull the thing on the gate, the latch on the gate, I start the video. I start the 4K video, and then as soon as he's in the dirt, I let go. And so I might have, if he stays on the thing the whole time, you a rodeo fan, Jan? I think it's I think it's 8 seconds if he makes the whole thing. So if he goes 8 seconds, I'm shooting 30 frames a second. I've got 240 frames to choose from, like I did with this kid, and I pulled that frame out of it. Okay, which won me a camera from Panasonic, which I needed like a hole in the head because I had like 100 of them at the time. My garage was full of them. But you can pull a frame out. So as I was, I thought this was really cool because Venice Beach, these guys are really good, and I'm following them and I'm shooting stills, and I can't get a thing because they're moving so fast. And I do the video and I get this picture. And now everybody, if they see the picture and they're like, oh my God, you're really good at that, aren't you? Yeah, right. You can stop any motion. So again, I'm going to show you in a second how, so slow motion. So this was shot at 120 frames per second. Now you watch. He stopped to tell me to go away. He's like, get out of here. But you can see it's kind of neat. You can see all their, I wish I could blow it up bigger. You can see their feet starting to dangle there and the ride starting to go real slow. And so this is just 120 frames per second. Now, a lot of times, cameras don't shoot audio with slow motion. Okay, and the reason for that is it would sound like that. So you have to add music behind it or something like that. And again, I tend not to go much above 120 frames per second. There's a big desire for people to want to go to 300 frames per second. They think the higher the frame rate, it's going to be really neat. So again, if I'm giving basic tips. One is if you try to shoot slow motion, start at 120 frames per second. I thought I went to the same carnival. I thought, God, I've got 300 frames per second in this thing, and I went to the roller coaster, and it looks like a really slow roller coaster. There's nothing interesting about it. If the people were throwing up their arms or not, but it's like it's painful. You're just waiting for this thing to take off, and it doesn't. So if your camera has slow motion, start at 120 frames per second. Okay, Wi-Fi. So I think all cameras that they sell here now, and all the cameras in the past 5 years, have Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi lets you shoot a video and control it from the camera. So you can have your phone, you can connect your phone via Wi-Fi, and you can start and stop the video. So if you've got it on a tripod or something, or somewhere in a remote location, you can stop and start it that way. You can also set focus that way too. On Panasonic cameras, if I've got this pointing at you and I'm on Wi-Fi, I can touch you on the screen and it'll focus on it. Time-lapse. Time-lapse is one of my favorites. Let me show the video first. So this is a video I made in Seattle. And so I think everybody knows what time-lapse is. We watched the Walt Disney things when we were kids of the flowers popping up that took place over a 30 or 40 day period. Well, time-lapse means, and it's built into all Panasonic cameras, and Brandon, it's built into most cameras nowadays, isn't it? Canons, Nikons, and Sonys. Okay. And so what it basically does is you can see, let me blow this up. Let me enlarge this. In the menu, which is over here on the left, what it does is it lets you choose the amount of pictures you're going to take and the interval between them. Okay, so if a camera shoots, if it's 30 frames a second 30 frames is a second of video. If you shoot 300 still pictures, that's going to be a 10-second time lapse. Okay, so let me go back to this one again. So it lets you, the cameras basically let you program in and say, I want to shoot 300, 600, 900 pictures, and I want to shoot them every 5 seconds or 10 seconds. You put the camera on a tripod like this, you push the button, and you walk away, and what you get is a video that looks like this. So this was in a hotel in Seattle. I checked into the hotel, and I went out for dinner, but before I went out for dinner, I pointed the camera out the window, and I told it to shoot a picture every, I think it was 10 seconds for 2 hours at sunset. And I get this, and if it was if you were watching this on a big screen at home, this is, I did out the back of the hotel the next time I came up and stayed, and I wanted to just capture that in a very quick sequence of it getting dark. So let me play that again, because like I said, I just really got bit by the time-lapse bug. and it just condenses this is like between 5 and 7 o'clock. And so it's great, again, for anything where you've got clouds racing across the sky or things like that. Let me condense this for a second. Get rid of this. Let me show you a couple more time lapses, because these are a fun way to get into video. Love the way my computer does that. Okay, so this is the first one I did. So again, what I did here is I set the camera on a tripod next to me. I set it to take a picture every 10 seconds for 2 hours as the sun set in Reno. I was sitting just out here on this porch, and the clouds were coming in over the Sierras. And so you probably get that here or close to here. There's probably lots of places you could set up in the fall to do this. And you're just capturing this great sense of movement. Okay. Oops. Let's get out of there. So then I did, this was an interesting one. I wanted to record, I was in Virginia City, Nevada, and I wanted to record this train that sort of comes in very slowly, the Virginia Truckee Railroad. So I set it up, and I wanted to capture the train coming in, the people getting off, and you'll see what happens here. And I just wanted to catch this whole process, that once the train comes in, this takes about a half an hour for them to load everybody else on and get everybody else off, and these guys to come out and check the engine. And that's me stepping into the camera, which is something you shouldn't do. But it's just when you want to condense something down. So you want to condense something that takes a couple hours down to a couple of minutes. And try not to walk into it. So then I got ambitious, and I decided to do one for 28 days. And so these guys were building this car, and so I attached the camera up on a water pipe that was up on the wall, and I pointed it down, and you can buy an AC adapter for cameras, so to replace the battery, and I plugged it into the wall. And every 4 days I had to go out and put a new SD card in. But it ran for 28 days while these guys built this car. And so they could see. Now, the neat thing about time-lapse is, not only do they have this video, they have the 18,000 pictures I shot, in which I didn't calculate this out and realize I'd have 18,000 pictures at the end. But they've actually got a still picture that was taken every 2 minutes of them doing this, of them building this car. So if they want to see something that they did inside of the car, they can go back through my still pictures. But they've got this great video of them building this car, and I won't bore you with all. It goes for about 10 minutes, but you can see them.
What's the resolution of your still images again?
This, I lowered it. So this was 1080p. This was only 2 megapixels. Yeah, because I was taking so many. Now, normally when I'm shooting time lapses like the ones you've seen of Seattle and stuff, I leave the camera at the normal resolution, because if I'm shooting, let's say the Seattle one, I think I shot 900 pictures in 2 hours. The SD card will hold that. SD cards now will hold 3,000, and they're JPEGs. I don't do RAWs when I'm doing this.
So the resolution in Seattle was like 4 or 5.
That would the resolution. Well, it would have been more than 4K. It would have actually been each picture would have been 20 megapixels. But yeah, but when you condense them into a time lapse and you make a movie out of it, it can only be 4K. You can't go higher than that, just because the video would be too big. So it's got to condense it. So the pictures are all high resolution, but the video, when you make the video, it lowers the resolution. Yeah, and now I don't know about the other brands of cameras, but like in the Panasonic, if I set this up to shoot 600 pictures, when it's done, let's say when I came back to the room after having dinner and it had shot all these pictures and it was dark, there's a display on the back that says, like on your camera, that says, do you want to make a video out of this? And you just say yes, and it makes it right in the camera. You don't have to do this in separate software.
Would automatically, if you're in time lapse, would it make it JPEG rather than RAW?
No, you can shoot both. You can shoot, but then you end up with 900 RAW pictures. And the RAW ones, it won't process into a video. The RAW ones are for your use. And there's software that'll do it, but we don't want to get into that. That just makes that's a whole nother game to make the videos on your computer. But time lapse is just something. It helped me get more comfortable with video. So let's talk just a little bit, just shortly. We're almost at the end here, about editing video, because this is the scariest part. This is the part where. What? Oh yes. I thought you were giving me the time signal. Get off the stage. So editing video. So again, I try to keep everything as simple as possible. If you're just getting into video, don't go out and buy an expensive program. Okay? So simple and free. Apple iMovie comes with every Mac. DaVinci Resolve is a free download. Or if you're on a PC or you don't like either one of those, go to Google and type in free video editing software. There'll be hundreds of them. And just download one and try it. But what I find with people is after they've listened to me and done this class, they'll either go out and try video and they'll like it, or they'll go out and try video and they just realize they're a still photographer and they're never going to do video.
On the software again,
Yeah,
with a Mac, what is it?
it's iMovie with a Mac. That's included on every Mac.
And what about if you have Microsoft?
Microsoft, the newer ones don't include the software. I think you can still download it though. There's a Microsoft version of like iMovie. No, it's not iMovie. I can't. Do you remember? You don't know, Brand, what it's called? Yeah, Windows Movie Maker. Yeah. But there's all these other free ones too, especially for the PC. There's not too many free ones for the Mac because Apple includes iMovie with every Mac, and it's so easy to use.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If we wanted to buy another computer,
Sure.
because we got into this, what would you recommend? 'Cause I realize my computer's a little
Yeah.
old.
Well, I'm a Mac person. I would buy a Mac with the M1 chip, the new chip they have. That's supposed to handle video beautifully. And if it's a PC, I think I've got an i7. This is a PC. I think it's got an i7, whatever. I bought this at Costco, and it's like an i7 Generation 7 or something like that. It works fine. It needs quite a bit of memory, though. It's got like 24 gigabytes of memory. But most modern laptops and desktops will do it just fine. But if yours are a few years old, it can really drag on it. Now, if you get more into this, I like Adobe Premiere Elements. Brandon's probably looking at me like, Mark, I liked you until that point.
I use Premiere Elements for
Yeah. Yeah.
before I finally was able to afford a CC.
Yeah, and that's the reason you do it.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's
Just starting out.
it's about $79. And it.
100 if you want Photoshop too.
Yeah, you can get Photoshop.
And then buying the bundle because you get both.
Yeah, you get both of them.
Elements and
Yeah.
Premiere Elements. And all they are is just cut down versions of the full CC subscription that you needed.
Yeah,
$10 a month.
exactly.
Actually, for Premiere, it's even more
Yeah,
than that.
and you can run it on two computers. You used to be able to run it on a Mac and a PC. I don't know if you can anymore.
Yeah, you get the Mac
Yeah.
PC version, and it's what would you call it, a permanent license. So it's not something you have to pay yearly for.
Right? Yeah, you're not renting it. Yeah, basically. So.
You use it for as long as you want.
Yeah.
And then when you're ready to upgrade to the full version.
Right, and that's Adobe Premiere without the elements on the end. And Premiere is about Elements is like a light version. There's like you can't do a lot of the color correction. You can't open some of the files that are maybe like the 10-bit 420. It's meant for a person like myself who just wants to make easy videos, and you can put the clips together, you can add music to it, but it wouldn't let you do like a high-end production. Like if you shot one that was off color, it gives you limited color capability.
We don't sell it here,
Yeah.
unfortunately. I wish we did. It's available right
Yeah.
next to the Best Buy. You can go there and pick it up.
Yeah, but
Full discs that they sell.
yeah, or online. Yeah, but Best Buy.
If you just want something quick and easy to
Yeah,
like put some video together, cut them up, and add some transitions, make some titles,
yeah.
make a video.
Yeah, all my videos, like at the end, I'm going to put up my sites. All mine are done in Premiere Elements. And Brandon's a good example because he started out with it, but then he got to a point in video where he wanted more control. He wanted to do a lot more things. And then he went to the Adobe Premiere, which is, you have to, that's the subscription. That's monthly subscription. Or you can go to, yeah, you can go to Final Cut Pro if you're,
Well, 90% of the time, I probably just use what's already in Elements anyway.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
It's just cutting stuff together. For hardcore color editing, things like that, that's
Yeah.
a little too light.
Yeah,
So
the-
you
the-
go to Premiere when you're doing like vlog, stuff like that.
Exactly, yes.
But if they're not doing that, Premiere Elements is great.
Yeah.
Moving from that version to the full version,
Yeah.
you already pretty much know how to use it.
The biggest problem you're going to run into is if you run into serious video people, they're going to look at you like, oh, you don't use that, do you? You know, it's like there's always this. It's like the when I was talking about the shutter angle versus shutter speed. If you tell people that you just push this red button to make these videos and they're a video person, they're just going to look at you like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. But the average person is not going to see the difference, you know. So again, I would recommend if you've got an Apple computer, it's already built in. If you don't, I would recommend Adobe Premiere Elements because it works on both the Mac and the PC.
If you have a Mac, still, Premiere Elements is going to be far better
Yeah.
than iMovie.
I agree.
It's still not like up to the like Final Cut Pro. It's
Yeah.
actually the full version of iMovie.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same deal.
Yeah, iMovie kind of drives me crazy a little bit. It's got some funny things about the way it works.
Movie Maker.
Windows Movie Maker is a pretty cut down. It's a free
Yeah.
software. So
It's a good way to start.
yeah, I mean, if you want to put a clip together and then add a transition and a title, that's about it. But yes, you can put all your pictures and photos together in this little short video.
Yeah, in fact, I'll. Hold on.
Well, I would share one of my presentations. I've done photography since I was 89.
Yeah.
And in high school, I lived in the darkroom a lot.
Uh-huh.
And I really didn't want that. And I did all my black and white, and I got into color. So that was one of my hesitations when I retired and when I got back into this. I didn't want to be spending, I wanted to be an artist, not at the computer 8 hours.
Yes, yes. And that's how I am too, yeah. That's why I want to keep this simple because a lot of people who do video live in. My son does it for a living. He works on the TV show Westworld, and he does the post-processing on Westworld where they make the robots and they make that stuff. He's 10 hours a day. He sits in front of a computer making robots and monsters and scary scenes and stuff like this. And I'm like you. I don't want to do that. I want to go out and take pictures. You know, and so that's why, like, this is what Elements looks like, and it's just as simple as dragging your videos into a timeline, and then basically what's nice is you can, when you go to output it, you can put it right on YouTube or Vimeo. You can send it right there if you want to, if you have an account. It's just as easy can use, and there's just a ton of tutorials online. But if you've already got Lightroom, let me show that for a second here. If you've already got Lightroom, okay, so this is the current version of Lightroom, and these are all videos I've shot. You can edit, you can't put the clips together in Lightroom, but you can edit them. So a good example is let's take this one, which is 26 seconds long. Okay, so now if you've used Lightroom for still photography, you're used to all the controls on the side. You're probably not used to, let me see if I can blow this up and still, oh, it is big. Okay, so there's these settings over here. There's this wheel right here, okay, which I don't think I can make that any larger. What this does is this is for videos. This lets me drag this frame by frame like I was telling you. Remember, there's 30 frames in each second of video. So if I drag this is how I did the kid on the skateboard. I just drag this to where I wanted it. Let's say I want that as a still picture. Okay. Oops, sorry about that. I can just do this. I can click this symbol next to it here, and I can capture that frame out of the video and have a still. So that's how I do the rodeos, and that's how I did the kid on the skateboard. But you can also, when you play, let's say you think this video is too long and let's say you want this video to start here. In Lightroom, you can just drag this slider over there, play the video. Let's say you want it to end there. You can drag, oops, you have to pause it. You can drag this in there, and then when you export it, you're only exporting that piece. So you can edit your scenes here. So if you've got a scene you want to make a YouTube video of, like this is how I did my granddaughter at the beginning. That was just one scene that I wanted to put on YouTube. And so, but I overshot it. There was some before her mother started coming in from the kitchen as I was waiting for her to start moving with the cake. And so I was able to cut that off in Lightroom, export it, and then just put that on YouTube. So put it online. Okay. So there's two big choices. So if you want to see, now I put my sites up here. I'm on Vimeo as Mark Toal, that's my name, and I'm on YouTube as Mark Toal. And you'll see just all sorts of videos I've made that are slight training videos. These aren't professional videos, and I want to put them up there just to show what I do, then and how to sort of get into video to make it easy. YouTube is going to be your most popular. Now, a question I get too is people will be like, okay, if you put that video of your granddaughter on YouTube, I don't want everybody to see it. You can make all these private. So you can put something on YouTube or on Vimeo and say, only make it visible to people who have a link. So if you want to put a family video up there, you can store videos up there that people can't see. Or you can share them if you're like me and you want to try to get famous at an old age. But the difference is, by the way, YouTube has everything on it. So, you've watched, there's stupid videos on YouTube. Vimeo is more for people who make serious videos. And the videos are not usually things like cats bouncing off of walls and, silly videos like you see on YouTube. So that's what Vimeo is, although most people probably don't know what it is. Okay. Again, online help. There's just a million tutorials. If you want to know about white balance, if you want to know about shutter angle, you just go to YouTube and you type it in, shutter angle, whatever camera you've got. If you've got a Z9 or a Z7, you just type in Z7 shutter angle and somebody will have made a video about it. Okay. And I think we're just about at the end here. We have time for a few questions if you have them. Again, thank you, Horn Photo, for hosting this and recording it. There's cookies. Is there still cookies? There's still cookies. Yes, sir.
I have actually an advertisement.
Sure.
Like I say, every decade or so, I try looking at video.
Uh-huh.
Or movies.
Yep.
Always fall back. But the last time, 5 years ago, I went to a local organization called CMAC.
Okay.
It was a community, it's down in Central.
That's the old Fresno Beetle.
Yeah. The old Fresno Bee Building.
Okay.
They are wonderful.
What do they do?
They train
Uh-huh.
for free people who want to make videos.
Oh, are they like the public access? Yes. Yeah, we have one of those. Yeah.
Community access.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yeah.
So for $25 or $50 a year, you can go down there and take all kinds of classes. They'll train you in they'll train you how to write scripts, how to do filming. They will loan you real live equipment,
Yeah.
lights, video,
Mhm.
and they're just a nice bunch of people.
Yeah.
Great community,
Mhm.
and you can learn to film outside.
Yeah.
But they've also got a studio there, and they'll give you training on studio filming.
Yeah.
So if you want to take their courses, kind of like 1 night or 2 nights, 3 nights, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I just think they're the greatest thing.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. No, I was connected.
I went
Yeah.
through that program. I went through those.
Yeah.
I learned how to do, Premiere, editing.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yep.
some YouTube stuff, several hours worth, and that's when I said, nah, I'm gonna do
Yeah. I know.
I won't say it'll convince you to do video.
No.
But it's a great resource.
Yeah. And
What's it called? CMAC. CMAC.
Community Media Access Collaborative.
yeah.
I don't know that
Yeah. And that's why again I'm not at all, because I do very little video. I mean, it's sometimes 10% a year of my stuff is video, but for that right scene, it's like that tractor festival I went to, I wanted to convey that sound that I just can't. The still pictures are beautiful and I still take them, but you don't get that thump 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 of the engine and the steam coming out. Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
I have to say,
Oh, thanks.
as much as I advertise CMAC, but I have no connection with.
Yeah.
This-
Yeah. And a lot of things I like to, like I photograph, I lucked out and I became the photographer for a real steam train in Portland, one of these ones that runs. And again, I would shoot all these still pictures for several years. And then one year I was like, God, you just don't get that feeling of that big thing coming down the street, coming down the tracks with the steam coming out of it and the feeling of it. So So anyways, if you want to feel like you can do it too, look at my videos, because they'll show you can do it too. Because again, I just sort of photograph what I love, and I always keep in mind, is there something moving here? Is there something that this is going to make a better video than it does a still picture? That's all I keep thinking about. You know, I still shoot some business stuff, and I shoot mostly like veterinarians and doctors' offices, and I come in and I do headshots of all the employees. And this one just moved, and she's like, "Would you come over and shoot the new building and stuff? But we want video." And I've never done it, you know, where I've charged for it. I do all these for fun, the time lapse and stuff like that. And I said, well, give me some suggestions, you know. But you know what she wants is, because now when you go to a website, you don't want to just see pictures. You want to see something moving, you know. And she wants somebody like she doesn't want just the employees with their dogs. She wants the dog jumping on the employee or walking or doing something. So, you know, it's creeping in there more and more, you know. And again, I'm not saying life is about getting a lot of views online, but you know, when you put a video online and you get 10,000 views before you can even get home, it's kind of cool. You know. So anyways, well, thank you all for listening, and I'll be here, before I forget, I'll be here all day tomorrow. There's going to be special deals on LUMIX cameras if you're interested, or if you have any questions about tonight or any questions about anything else, or you want to talk to any of these guys about video, come on in. 10 to 5? 10 to 5? 10 to 6. 10 to 6 tomorrow. The LUMIX sales goes on also on Saturday. So anyways, well, thank you all for coming down on a nice night. Great.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Mark Toal.